Hello everyone! Today's joke of the day is, why did the tofu cross the road? Stay tuned to find out. Our learning targets for today are, I can write a function for a geometric sequence, and I can find the given term of a geometric sequence. Just to review from the last video, a geometric sequence is a repeated pattern of multiplying by the same factor every time. So we can also, just like arithmetic sequences, we can write geometric sequences as a function. And this is the function that we will use. So we have f of x is equal to a, which is the zero term, times b, which is our common ratio, to the power of x. In this case, we have to be careful that b is the only thing that's being raised to the power of x. And then we also multiply by a. So when we're typing that into our calculator, we'll have to make sure we're being pretty careful with how we enter that in. Okay, and then x is going to be our term number. Okay, so that's like the 21st term or the 18th term or whatever term we're trying to find in our sequence. So let's write a few functions. Let's look at this sequence here. Okay, let's try and figure out first, what is our common ratio? Well, from -1 to 6, that's multiplying by a -6. We'll check again, 6 to -36, that's also again multiplying by a -6. Okay, if we were unsure what the common ratio would be, we could always just take our second term divided by our first term, so 6 divided by -1, that gives us a -6, so we know our common ratio is going to be equal to -6. Okay, now we need to find our zero term. That will be the term that comes before our first term, right? Because our first term, 0, comes before 1. So let's see, we have -1, and then we're going backwards. So if we're multiplying by -6 each time, we're going to do -1 divided by -6 to figure out what our zero term is. And it looks like we have a negative divided by a negative, so that makes a positive 1/6 for our zero term. So then when we're writing our function, we know it's going to be f of x is equal to our zero term, which is 1/6, times our common ratio, which is -6, make sure we keep that negative in there, to the power of x. Okay, in this case, only our -6, our common ratio, is being raised to that power of x. Now, if we're trying to find the 21st term, we'll do f of 21. That way, we know what term we're finding, is equal to, well, 1/6 times our -6 to the 21st power. We substitute in 21 where we see an x. So let's type this into our calculator here. Do this along with me. I'll take 1/6, put that in parentheses, times, in parentheses again, -6, and then we can do that little caret button to the 21st power. Okay? And when I get that, I get gotta get my pen here. Get -3.66, but then I get that a bunch of other numbers, right? And then I get that E15. Well, remember when you're talking about scientific notation, that E15 means we're multiplying it by 10 to the 15th power. So really our answer is -3.66 times 10 to the 15th. Make sure you're checking that in your calculator to make sure you get the same answer as me and you see how that gets entered in. Okay? Here we go. Let's look at another one. If we want to find the 18th term of this sequence, okay? Well, we have 1/4 to 1/2. That is multiplying by 2. Okay, if we're unsure, we can always take one term divided by the previous term. The easiest one's going to be 2 divided by 1. Well, that's going to give us 2. So we know that our common ratio is equal to 2. Okay, then we want to find our zero term. Well, if we're multiplying by 2 each time, that's going to be dividing by 2. So our zero term is going to be 1/4 divided by 2. If we do that in our calculator, 1/4 divided by 2, or 1/4 times 1/2, that will give us 1/8. So if we're going to write our function here, we'll end up with f of x is equal to 1/8 times our common ratio, which is 2, to the power of x. Okay. Now, if we want to find the 18th term, we'll do f of 18, which is equal to 1/8 times 2 to the 18th power. Okay, and then I type that into my calculator just like I had done for the previous one. And f of 18, it looks like, gives me 32,768. Check that in your calculator to make sure that you get the same thing. All right, now let's look at a few more examples. Okay, if we're going from -3 to -15, well, that's multiplying by 5. I can just see that. But if you can't just see that, you can always do -15 divided by -3, and that is equal to a +5. Okay, to find our zero term, we go backwards. So our zero term, if we're multiplying by 5 each time, we're going to take our -3 divided by 5. So it looks like our zero term is -3/5. Let's write our function then. F of x is going to be equal to -3/5. Okay, I'm going to put this in parentheses, times 5 to the power of x, right? 5 to the power of x. That's our function there. Now, if we want to find the 20th term, we can substitute in 20 where we see an x, so we'll do f of 20 is equal to -3/5 times 5 to the 20th power. Okay? And if I type that into my calculator, which you can do along with me, I end up with f of 20 is equal to -5.72 times 10 to the 13th power. Okay, that makes sense because we had a -3/5, right? Our 5 wasn't negative, so we didn't have a negative to an even power, but we're multiplying by a negative, so we should get a negative answer. All right, let's find the 16th term of this sequence. Well, we're going from -2 to 4. I know that that's multiplying by -2. Okay, but again, if I didn't know that, I could just do 4 divided by -2. That gives me -2. So that's my common ratio. It's equal to -2. Now my zero term, I'll take my -2. I'll write down zero term. Take my -2 divided by -2, right? Because -2 is my first term and -2 is my common ratio. So that gives me 1 for my zero term. So if I'm writing my function, we'll end up with f of x is equal to 1, that's my zero term, times -2 to the power of x. Well, 1 times anything is really just that thing, so we don't really need that 1 in this case. So we'll end up with f of x is equal to -2 to the x power as our function. Okay, now if we want to find the 16th term, we can take f of 16, which equals -2 to the 16th power. Now if we pause right here and we think about it, we have a negative to an even power, okay? So we should end up with a positive answer. So if you don't end up with a positive answer when you type it into your calculator, check that you entered it in correctly. Okay, so we'll want to put it in parentheses like that. And we should end up with 65,536. Okay, just a couple more examples here. 1 to -5, oh, that's pretty easy. I can tell that that is being multiplied by -5, so that's my common ratio. My zero term, well, we'll go do the opposite. Instead of multiplying by -5, we'll divide by -5. So we take 1 divided by -5 to get -1/5 as our zero term for this one. Okay, and then we can write our function. F of x is equal to, my zero term is -1/5, and my common ratio is -5. So we have -1/5 times -5 to the power of x. Now we're going to look for the 25th term. So we'll do f of 25 is equal to -1/5 times -5 to the 25th power. And that's what I'm going to type into my calculator. But right now, I'll know that I'm going to end up with -1/5, so a negative, right? That's not changing. And then -5 to the power of 25. Well, it's a negative to an odd power, so that'll give us a negative. Okay, so then we have a negative times a negative, so we should end up with a positive. When I type that into my calculator, I end up with a 5.96 times 10 to the 16th power. Okay, so that is my answer for the 25th term in this sequence. Okay, one more. we'll have 16 to 4. Okay, this is the first one that's like this, where we are multiplying by a fraction. Okay, 16 to 4, well, let's see, 4 divided by 16, right? That's how we find our common ratio. That is 1/4. So really we're multiplying by 1/4 every time. Then we can find our zero term. For multiplying by 1/4, that's like dividing by 4. So to find our zero term, we're going to do 16 either divided by 1/4 or 16 times 4, which is going to equal 64. 64, yep. Okay, so that's our zero term. And then we can write our function, f of x is equal to 64 times 1/4 to the power of x. If we're looking for our 15th term, f of 15 is equal to 64 times 1/4 to the 15th power. When I type that into my calculator, I end up with 5.96 times 10 to the -8th this time, okay? All right, so those are some functions that we can write to model our geometric sequences. And for our joke of the day, the answer, right? Why did the tofu cross the road? Well, to prove it wasn't chicken. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.